Can you believe it, ladies and gentlemen? It is episode 30 of the Give My Head podcast. Normally these things only last about 5-6 weeks. I don't know how we've lasted 30 flipping episodes. I'm joined by my comedy colleagues,
Michael McDowell
and Damon Quinn.
We have managed to survive by 30 episodes by having a wide variety of very intelligent and interesting people. We've had actors, we've had comedians, we've had politicians. This week, ladies and gentlemen, we've somebody very, very special. Alex, I don't know if I'm going too far. Can I call you a friend? I think I would regard you as a friend.
Well, after discovering you had 29 guests before me, I'm not quite so sure I would say friend now, but yes, generally speaking, yes, guest is
well,
fine.
Look, Alex, I'm going to be blunt. There may be some people who, because we do a lot of comedy, we have acting and stuff like that, but some people might go, who the heck is Alex Kane? Alex Kane, basically, if any 3 or 4 people are gathered in Northern Ireland in a TV studio and have to discuss politics, Alex Kane will be there. He is a well-known political commentator, columnist, always on the telly during an election, during political shows. You are there, Alex. You have a far more interesting life outside that, which we will get to, but I want to talk about politics first. Are you still every single TV interview with you and Alison Morris, you have to be together, the two of you are kind of a double act, aren't you?
We are. Somebody put it was the Slugger O'Toole Christmas event about 10 years ago. And Alison and I had never met each other. I'm not quite sure why we'd never met each other up to that point, but somebody said, stick them together, see what happens. And it just, sometimes you meet somebody and it's just, it clicks. Everything clicks. And within a year, people were saying, how long have you two known each other? You must have worked together for 10, 15 years. And they've gone, no, we haven't even completed 1 year yet. And everything.
Stuck with these guys for 30 of them. That's right. We still haven't clicked.
Oh, well, I'm very lucky then in that basis. No, it just works because we come from different points of view and so on. But the key is in all of this, if it's going to work, the audience have to know it's working. They have to know you have a respect, a fondness for each other. And I like to think that's what comes through. And that's why people keep it
I think it
back,
does. We do the long and the short of it with David Hume.
Oh, he's
the
wonderful,
same sort
David,
of thing.
yeah.
But we kind of click. We're very different people. You're often billed as a unionist commentator, and I know there's a certain person in Donaghadee complains that why are unionists always labelled as unionists and the likes of Chris Donnelly's just a commentator? Is that something that annoys you? Are you happy being a unionist commentator? Or are you?
It's never worried me in the sense that, I mean, I think there's some unionists wish I wasn't a unionist commentator because they assume I'm probably more critical of them than people who would be, defined as someone. But I've no difficulty with that, Tim, because I comment on you. I do wider things. I do, British, UK politics, Irish politics, American politics, and so I do all of that. But in Northern Ireland, I'm specifically known for trying to explain unionism. If it's a crisis,
what
a
job you have, my friend.
I almost built a side room to the house from having to explain the DUP when they did the deal with the Conservatives, 2017. Because so many journalists, not only from the UK but from across the world, so we've been told to ask you, Alex, about unionism and about the DUP, because we all unionists always assume everybody knows everything about us and cares about us. People don't really. So
you get like Al Jazeera funnily up saying.
Oh yes, I've done them as well. Yes, I've done them. I love those ones where they have to, because I don't speak any foreign languages.
So did you get Al Jazeera ringing you up? What's this about these religious extremists in the DUP? What is this about?
Yes, because nobody really knows, and it's funny, but they know Ian Paisley. In the same way that everybody who's ever done anything with unionism knows David Trimble and Ian Paisley. Apart from that, even someone like Robinson, who'd been a member of Parliament for 25 years, very few people knew who he was.
Yeah. But, you worked for the Ulster Unionist Party. Were you there Jim Molyneux's time? What time?
I wasn't working for them then. Oddly enough, I first joined the Ulster Unionist Party in 1970. Right. When I was about 15, 16. My father was a senior member of the party in Armagh in the days when they'd only 12 seats. So it was one constituency. It was a time when the Ulster Unionist Party had an awful lot of members. So the Armagh Association was probably 5, 6, 7,000 people, and my dad was chairman. He was also in the Orange Order, and he was one of the officers in the County Armagh. He was also the clerk of the Kirk of the First Armagh Presbyterian Church. Okay. So that was it. You had the 3 pillars of unionism: the Ulster Unionist Party, the Orange Order,
never
the Presbyterian Church. I was sort of. I got not involved in that sense, but I was aware of it because people would come to our house. I met politicians when I was quite young, and so when I listened, I'm a listener. I'm not particularly. A lot of people don't believe this, but I still remain terribly, terribly shy. So I've even I have this thing, the Beetlejuice thing. When I have to do anything, you sit there, you palpitate, blah blah blah, and it's showtime. You basically push the button, you start. But the great thing about that is that if you don't do the social side so much, you listen far more. So I listened to a lot of people, and I got involved. And just at that age, I was young, and I couldn't understand why. We had to put shutters and bulletproof windows on the bulletproof glass in the windows, as someone would want to shoot my father, or he could be a target. When
that's
you're
happening when you're a teenager. That's also
yes, I would have 13,
been
14, and you just think why, and I know people. If you're removed from something.
Yeah.
You have one perception, but when you're actually there, I mean, John Taylor his family were very close to our family, and I remember when John was shot, leaving quite close to his office for First Armagh Presbyterian Church, close to there, and I remember the first time ever to see my mum just almost fainting, because it was such a shock. It really brought it home, because she remembered John as a boy.
Yeah, of course.
A special boy, she used to call him. So unionism has always been there. It wasn't one of these moments I was converted, thought I'd be unionist, and here I stand, blah blah. It was just this thing of, it was inculcated without being forced into my system.
So you told
that was
us,
a very long answer, wasn't it? But
you told us the first person you ever canvassed for was a certain Jim Allister. He's done well for himself, hasn't he?
It's all thanks to me, if it hadn't been for me. No, he lost. Yes, he lost that campaign, sadly. No, it was because we were university, as was Wallace Thompson, as was Jim Wells. There were a group of us, who just, and Jim was in the DUP, and I was in, it was still called the Conservative and Unionist Association at that time. So I met Jim, and he was standing for the Student Union presidency.
Can't imagine Jim as a student. There's something about you can't. Really, can you imagine Jim with long hair, flares, in their mid-70s, smoking a few spliffs? And
well, you'd be quite right not to imagine him like that.
Did he iron his slacks? And
no, Jim, that actually was me. I used to wear the sports jackets and polo neck and the Farah trousers. I was the most untypical student. But no, Jim is one of those wonderful characters that if it's the hardest thing, you could take the Jim from now and take him back to there, and nobody would notice the difference. And you can take the Jim from there and put him here, and nobody would know. And Jim would tell you that he takes pride. I mean, his consistency, his self-belief, his unwillingness to waver is part of who he is. So,
good.
Well, no, not really.
No,
Since Muhammad Ali said, a man needs to be willing to change and adapt to the views.
Well, he did change. He became more extreme and left the DUP and set up the TUV. Someone said there was a bit of change there.
So you actually worked for the DU or the Ulster Unionist Party at one stage, didn't you? You worked for them.
I did. I had for the
press department or something.
Longest period I had was from 1999 through till 2010, and I was based up in the Assembly.
Right.
And I was speech writing and doing research.
Was Trimble time?
Trimble time, and then ended up as, because I think I'd run out of obvious candidates, ended up as Director of Communications, and then just. I just got bored. That's one of sometimes people think politics is fascinating. They're watching it. You're up close to all these people. You watch them. You see prime ministers and presidents. This is wonderful. There came a day when I was just bored with it all. I remember saying to Kerry, as my partner, I'm getting nothing from this. There's no sense of fun. There's no sense of anything changing. And we'd been through a series of miscarriages at that time. And I remember saying to a couple of people, it had been 4 miscarriages. I remember saying to Kerry and a couple of people in the party, if we bring one to safety, and bring one to life, that's it. Because I was 52 then, and I was always going to be an older dad. And I thought, that's it. I've just realised. It's a horrible way to learn a lesson in life, but I just realised if we manage to get this child out, that's going to be my priority. And at that point, I went into full-time freelance.
Right.
So.
Not decommissioning of Sinn Féin IRA weapons. That wasn't your...
No, well, I have to say I had a problem with that, because I never liked the phrase no guns, no government, because I was a weak position, because you say to your enemy, no guns, no government. You can't have government until you give us your guns. They said, well, okay, hang on. So we keep our guns, you don't have government either. And it just became this, very torturous. I'm a firm believer, when you know something almost certainly has to happen, get on and do it. Because the longer you hang something out, the more likely it is you have to do a U-turn. And as soon as you do a U-turn, you're going to lose half your party, or you're going to lose a quarter of them, or you're going to lose significant players. Just do things. Get on with it and just think, right, we're going to have government. We want government. We've come this far. I would have just pulled the rug away and said, guys, we'll give you 6 months. We're setting up the government right now. You don't have to give us anything. But let me tell you, if there's anybody shot, if there's any sign you're up to something, there's going to be a real reset of all of this. When you do that, what would Sinn Féin have done at that point? It's like, oh, Jesus, Trimble said we can have government, we're not ready to give a gun right now. But as soon as you leave everything in your opponent's court, it means that you're not playing your own game anymore, you're playing what they decide to let you play.
So if you were advising Volodymyr Zelensky now, what would you?
Don't get involved in Northern Ireland because the peace process will drag on much longer.
Stay where you are.
Stay where you are. That was terrible. There is probably no greater challenge in life for anyone than trying to lead a small country, against a much larger, better equipped, mad aggressor. And I just...
We're talking about Trump or Putin?
Well, it could be either in that case, to be honest. So, but I just, my heart goes out for him. I just... And I think it's one thing that people don't understand about Trump. People say he's exciting or he's changing, he's making the weather, he's, doing that. There's no moral compass there. That's what worries me. I think he does things and doesn't realise the long-term consequences. So saying but
he doesn't read. He doesn't have any understanding of history or anything.
No,
like that.
He understands the deal, and that's all that matters to him. The deal and the money side of it. So he sees Ukraine as earth-rich, those minerals, and there's this nonsense. So I can start. My guarantee of Russia never attacking you again is that there'll be a lot of American businessmen digging up half your country to get these metals out, and in Gaza, to the Palestinians. My guarantee that there won't be any more problem for you is we'll kick you out of your country completely and we'll build a resort. This is how he thinks. Yeah. But from his point of view, it gets America out of a lot of problems. It also gets America money, and it also, in terms of the minerals, it gives America a huge advantage in the technological.
There are those who would say that Trump is a psychopath.
Well,
that's their explanation for.
And I think it's more likely there are people who would say he isn't a psychopath. I think the vast majority just banked the fact that he is a psychopath. But, it's one of those things. He's got elected. People talk about, it's a worrying time. But maybe the most worrying thing is that a majority of people in America knew his record, knew everything. He didn't hide it. They said, are you accusing me of rape? Here's $1 million. You go away. And he still knew he was going to get elected. He didn't need to have an assassin have a go at him because at that point, he made that speech. Remember when the inauguration, when he said that he realised after I think it was the second one, that he'd been saved by God. And that was, that's Paisley territory. I remember Paisley saying in Armada speech once that he had been raised by God,
right, okay.
just to save Northern Ireland. And I think I became an atheist at that time. Yes, I knew you were going to jump in there.
Yeah. So where did that come from?
It came from, I was going to say it came from my dad, but my dad was the clerk of the kirk. So when you're 14, you're in the Presbyterian Church, they take you through a few communion classes. And
they're very long.
They're very long.
Services are very long.
Yes, and the catechisms and things. And then at the end of it, you go up to the top of the church with the minister and a few people, and you sign something. I can't remember what it is you're supposed to sign. And I remember saying to my dad, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not saying I don't believe right now, but I'm not comfortable with this. And this is going to be very difficult for him because, a small place like Armagh and someone like him, don't forget the Orange, the LCUs, that their son, is about to say, I'm an atheist. But he turned to me and he said, I'd rather you wait and make up your own mind and do this just to please me.
Wow.
And that actually ties into something else because...
my mother just clipped me around there. Get the mask, get in there, stop your nonsense.
We were lucky in Presbyterians, they gave us a choice. But in terms of politics years later, so that would have been 14, so about 4 years later, I was Faulkner, who I was minded to support power sharing and so on. And again, I had a conversation with my dad about that and said, Dad, I think power sharing's away. From my age and my generation, this is going to be my first vote in the 1973 Assembly election. It has to be, for me, I'm going to vote that way. And is it going to hurt? And he gave the best advice to him I've ever had in my entire life. And he just looked at me and he just said, when you get to my age, and he would have been in his mid-60s, he said, you will have enough political baggage of your own. Do not start your journey with my baggage. I just thought, in the same way with the communion thing, it was just, that mattered. This thing about mattering, people say, why do you have these conversations? I was adopted, so, and you don't have no choice in adoption. You're just adopted by this guy, adopted into a unionist household and so on. And one of the great things, I don't know, I never ever spoke to him about it. He died when in my second year at Queen's, and I never had, to any young people listening, have the conversations with your dad and your mum when you feel like having them. Don't think I'll have it in 10 or 20 years. Have it when they're alive, in front of you, breathing and thinking, because you get older and you look back and think, why didn't And I bore my children stupid by saying, "Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to talk about when I'm dead?" No, not really, Daddy. But you think,
So you could really be a Fenian.
I like to think at the end of a book I'm writing, I will say, so you're looking for a surprise, and the surprise ending is, I was born a Catholic, so, and they want, but again, maybe that feeds into the atheism as well, because I don't know. But nowadays,
you don't know.
Well, nowadays, if you're adopted,
you can find
you
out.
get everything. I could find out, Tim, but and I know this sounds like a terrible cliche, is the people who adopted me. They were nice, middle class, comfortable, professional people who couldn't have children of their own. Mm-hmm. They were happy. They were settled. They were successful. They had very good social, political circles. They did not need to be disturbed. My dad was in his 50s and my mum was in her late 40s. Mm-hmm. And they took this kid who wasn't speaking, this mute child, who had been turned down. I discovered later that about 6 other couples had looked at me. Right. And decided they didn't want me.
You weren't very chatty.
I know I wasn't. Yeah, an ordinary wee git, as people would say. But yes, I wasn't. But when they finally came out.
Sorry, what age were you when you were finally?
I was adopted when I was 6.
Right.
So I went into I went into the orphanage when I was 2, and I have no memories. I must have lived somewhere for the first 4 years of my life. I have no memory of that. I have no memory of. And they always say, people say you don't always remember everything, but most kids will have a memory of faces. They'll have sounds, noises, smells. Yeah. I have nothing of that. Right. I spent 18 months to 2 years in an orphanage. I have no memory of that at all, of people or anything. I was in a school, Bluestone Primary School in County Armagh. I was there for about 9 months because the orphanage was required by law to send me. Mm-hmm. And I have no memory of that. Indeed, when I did some work on it a few years ago, I found the school and we finally tracked down a teacher and said, I vaguely remember some of the orphanage children, and I don't know, I can't remember you specific, but I do remember one of the young boys in my class who said nothing the whole time. He was in that, and I didn't speak to my mother. My father and mother saw me maybe half a dozen times before I was adopted.
Yes.
And they say I didn't speak at all. I didn't even look up at them. But somehow, for some reason, they made that huge decision to bring this kid in.
That's a difficult decision for them to make. I mean,
it was
it's kind of good.
Well, it wasn't helped by the fact that when the release form with the little file that came with me said after an assessment by 2 psychiatrists, and I found that insulting. It took 2 of them to make that decision. But the conclusion the conclusion they reached was that this child, I think it's almost verbatim now, that this child is almost, in our opinion, almost certainly educationally subnormal, and we would recommend giving
words like that.
Yeah, on those days you did, yes.
Right.
It's one of those.
You did a documentary about that. Is it still available on BBC sites? A long time ago?
It probably is about 8 or 9 years ago.
It was, before I was an orphan, and I remember because I heard it, and I think I wrote to you and said it was very, very emotional, without being maudlin, but it was really kind of very, very extremely moving because you literally didn't speak to your adoptive parents for couple of years.
Nothing.
I mean, nothing. So they adopt you, bring you into your home.
But about 8.5 before I finally decided I deigned to speak to them.
How did that happen?
Did you actually, were you aware you could speak but you weren't speaking, or was that something you chose not to speak?
Well, the thing is, that's a good question, because I don't know the answer to that, because all I knew, I think at that point, was nothing. If that makes sense. I didn't know. People talk about safety and certainty and security and feeling loved and feeling confident and feeling wanted, and somewhere they think, this is where I belong. I think it was only when I suddenly realised this is where I'm going to be. Because my mum said, when I came from the orphanage, there's a little case that very kindly packed a pair of trousers and some underpants and socks and an orange. I don't know what they thought the orange was going to do. You're feeling suicidal, have an orange, and but apparently I kept that suitcase under my bed for a year, refused to move it, and I suddenly realised one day, I think it was because I thought I was going to need it again. So it was only when I don't know, I can't explain it. I just know one day I just decided that I'm where I'm supposed to be, and it began to make sense. And the other thing about my parents, Sam and Adelaide, they made no effort. They didn't try and push me. They didn't try and make me do things. Because sometimes, if I didn't speak, they didn't try and excuse me and say, "Oh, well, he's adopted." He's finding himself,
Wow.
And
it must have been a tough 1.5 for them.
It was an extraordinarily difficult year for them, and it's because back then,
Sorry, this is a stupid question, but you didn't speak. Did you go up to your room and go, oh, were you talking internally to yourself? Were you
I think I was trying, because I had no memories of anything before, of the orphanage or my original home and things like that. I was trying to, this room, which is my bedroom, I think this is the one place I felt safe in. But I have no memory of thinking of having some deep philosophical, conversation. I'm finding my space and things like that. I just knew one day that this is now it. I'm not going in. I'm staying here, and these people are okay. And the other thing about them, they were not television people. We didn't have a television until I was about 16 or something like that. But they were newspaper people. The Irish Times, Beltel, the newsletter. And I think the Times, and then the local, the Armagh Gazette and things like that, and radio. There was a radio in every room. The old plug-in radios everywhere you went in the room. It was constant.
Right.
There was word, and that's where it came from. It was sort of, and they
Love
would
of
leave
language,
things. They would
love of
leave
words.
books open. Sometimes the picture books, and just leave them. My mum says after a while, after about 6 or 7 months, we could see you turning. But again, we just left with it. You have to find, and that was a wonderful thing about it. They realised I needed to find myself rather than them trying. Because nowadays, if you adopt a child or even foster a child, you're getting this. You're getting a huge file with everything. Back then, they gave you nothing. And people would say, because you mentioned that documentary, I think, I still get, there's not a week goes by, Tim, when somebody doesn't come up to me and just, even in a restaurant, someone would top you and say, sorry to disturb you. Are you ever going to do the follow-up to that? Did you find out where you came from? And I said, please.
Yeah.
It's funny because Paddy Jenkins, who plays Pastor Big B in Get Hobbies, he was adopted. And he actually remembers the day that he was brought down to Nazareth Lodge to pick his sister. He was told one day, you're getting your sister today. So they went down to Nazareth Lodge and he went, we'll have that one.
That's just deeply upset me. I was allowed to pick a cat when I was about 9. So he got to pick a sister. You've traumatised me now. I feel really bad.
Yeah, you got it. But it's the way it was done then. It was.
Yes,
it's incredible. And also, I find, it is surprising the amount of people who have been adopted. And there are those who say, no, my adopted mum and dad are my mum and dad. I'm happy with that. And that's that. And then there's others who want to find out who their, birth parents were and that sort of thing. But it seems to be split fairly evenly from one side.
Well, there are people. Well, sometimes, but I've done a lot of research on this, and sometimes people are fostered and adopted, and the big thing for them is, particularly if they've had children, they've got married or found a partner and had children of their own, and they have that moment. Particularly when Lila, who was the first child that had my DNA, the first person I'd ever held, hugged, wept over. Who I thought, this is my DNA. This person is part of me. And I remember thinking, just holding her, in the middle of the night when Carrie was still in the hospital, just thinking, how could anyone, under any circumstance, give something this personal, precious away? And then, so doing the research, I found a lot of people had maybe difficult adoptions, difficult fostering, and they wanted to see and they try and find. But when I talked to someone who's a real specialist, he said, tread with enormous care, Alex, because a lot of people now, the law allows you to do so many things. I can tell you 3/4 of the people I would deal with and our staff would deal with would tell you afterwards they wish they hadn't. Started that journey because one person that set up, the mother said yes, and this guy went, when asked her, apparently just asked the first question, she says, I didn't want you, but we weren't allowed to abort you back in the day. And imagine being told that. And there were a lot of cases, and people found that they were subject to rape inside the family. But the other thing for me, and yes, people always say, but you're someone who spent his whole life writing, deconstructing, drilling, asking people the most difficult questions. And it's because I had a wonderful set of parents who adored me, who what I am today, everything I am today, everything, my writing, my thinking, everything is because of their work, it's because of what they did. And there was no benefit. There was none of this thing, and I'm not knocking people because you can't get financial help now if you're fostering and adoption, supporting the kids, we do move them. They got nothing for this. This was enormously difficult for them, but they still did it, and I think, that's me.
At your
It's
phone?
not you.
At your phone? Alex Kane, for goodness sake.
I thought, well, I'm so upset by the cat. I was given I was allowed to
Do you know,
choose.
I'm going to turn mine off as well, like a professional. I just noticed my phone's on here.
It is well done, yeah.
I will switch it off.
Yeah.
sorry.
Ringtone as well.
I think we'd all better have
I spot that moment of it.
Oh, that was really an emotional moment.
I know.
you were getting there.
But again, there are a lot of people who've been adopted, and I know some people have been adopted and then had been contacted by siblings that they didn't
Yes,
know they
that's
had,
right.
and then found they've nothing in common, and kind of it got a bit embarrassing, and went, oh yeah, kind of after 40 years I've discovered you, and you go, well, we've nothing in common,
Like
really.
it's very rarely. I mean, it's not always going to be the long lost families. Davina, McCall result.
That's not Davina.
Is it?
It's not Davina McCall
Is it?
and,
Maybe I'm right, sorry.
Nicky Campbell.
Yeah.
I think
All
it
right,
is.
sorry.
long lost families.
All right, okay.
He watches it all. And you don't, Tim.
All right, okay, sorry.
Okay, it's very rarely. But I mean, those are obviously good examples because they want to make good television, so they want the big emotional moments. But as you say, you never know what you're going to find out.
Well, you never know. And
when you go
sometimes-
down that route.
But I can understand there are people who desperately need to find the answers. And this is, it's extraordinary that someone like me who will sit for an hour with a politician, say, take me through, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And one of them even said to me at the end of it, oh, dear God, see all the way through that, I just wanted to say to you, well, you've never bothered to find out who your parents were, and you're asking me how I came to this particular position. But no, I just think if to anyone who's listening that has this thing about, searching and so on, it isn't always a happy ending. Sometimes you're given away, and the reasons are appalling. They're catastrophic in some senses, and for the parents as much as for you.
But also we have to remember that, like in the 1950s and the 60s. I mean, I'm sure it was the same in both communities, but particularly in the Catholic one, because of the whole position that the church took on that. I mean, to be pregnant out of wedlock in a Catholic family would have been, it would have been impossible.
Yes,
in many cases impossible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were brave enough who did stand against that, but it would have been very, very difficult, and I'm sure it was probably the same, and probably the same in both communities because of the sort of the social attitudes at the time.
It would have been, and I think the other thing is, I never, even though my mum lived till she was 85, I never thought of asking her how much they actually knew, because I know my mum always said to me, if you want to find out, find out. Right. And I said, I don't feel the need to find out, Mum, and so on. But I never. The obvious question should have been, well, were you given anything else apart from this very small file? Because I always wondered, did they ever know but it's one of those things. I was happy. I actually felt happy, and I've heard of. I mean, the one thing and you can never quantify it or put it in any logical sense, I think, to someone who hasn't been through it. I do know that where I was, the home where I was, and I think it applied to a lot of kids, when you got to a certain age, you were quite often shifted. If you hadn't been adopted, you were quite often shifted down to Belfast. And it's one of those moments I was thinking if I hadn't been adopted, because I know from what my mum and dad said that I had been seen by who hadn't chosen me, that if I hadn't been adopted, I would have almost certainly been shifted down to Belfast and Kincor. You don't know, but
right,
just one of the, I was taken to a place of safety because I have met people. I talked to two people who had been in a particular care home, and about one of them had been an alcoholic since he was about 14, 15 years old, basically, because he couldn't cope. And the other had become a selective mute. He just didn't want to talk about anything, and spent his whole life in the care system.
Because of abuse within the care system.
Because of what had happened in the care system. Because there was no one. That was what I think is now known as the deference era. When if somebody said the police or the priest,
they're obviously right.
They wouldn't do that. How the school team? No, they wouldn't. Whereas nowadays, there's a much better paper trail on kids from where they started, and so on. But how do you put that in words? So that sense of the back of your mind that I could have been. I'll always love that David Irvine once said to me, he said, if you'd come down, forgetting the Kincourse, I said, Alex, You know, because he used to about been adopted and so on. Said you'd have probably ended up, you know, just you'd have been in the UVF or something like that, and you'd been writing our press statements at some time or something like that. So I thought that could have been a career option had Sam and Adelaide said, no, we don't want it. So.
There's a lovely quote in that documentary, I think, that you said, I hope your past doesn't do too much harm to you, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Did you say that yourself, or somebody say that to you? Or
I think it's probably me. I'd probably quote in a book or something like that. But that's the damage with if you're finding... People go on these journeys, you know. I blame Cilla Black and Surprise. Do you remember she used to bring people back? And my mum always used to say, if these people haven't been in contact for 45 years, other than a free trip back from Australia to London, why would you want to see these people and things like
Thanks,
that?
Cilla.
Yeah. And again, with adoption, things like that, people always think there's some sort of special magic fairy tale story. And at the end, you know, it's all going to end up like Oliver Twist, you know, some kindly person, Mrs. Brownlow, I think it was, looking after you and, you know, bringing you into a whole new world. For a lot of it isn't that, you know, and sometimes you learn absolutely, you can't, by not finding the complete truth, I don't have to unlearn anything. And I don't want to get to a point where you go, you know, because I'll be 70 in a few months, I don't want to get to a point where I discover something I wish I hadn't known it. But I have, what my dilemma is, it's a difficult one. If I die, when I die, if I've made no provision in terms of my paperwork, it goes, it's destroyed.
Right.
So
Lila
so and Kerry would never be able to see it. Of course, they keep saying, you know, and I say, if I get this, I would want to open these. The stuff available, you know, you can't find. If you dig around,
you could find out.
I could lift up probably a few phone calls to people and say, look, can you blah blah, can we find it? And I think what you can do is maybe give it to a solicitor, and it becomes part of my estate.
Right.
And then, but then again, I think to myself, saying I do that, what happens in that case? And they open it and go, why, if Dad had known this?
Yeah.
You know, or thank God he didn't know it.
Yeah.
But there is part of me somewhere, and I don't know. I don't want to over dramatize. Because I think I think once you go within a generation and a half. There's nobody alive who ever knew you in real terms, and I can't imagine somebody's going to go in 150 years time. Oh, well, I must look this up or something like that. But equally, I don't want to traumatize them. I don't want them to you know, for me, all that matters is that they and it's the older dad thing as well, because, you know, Indy is my youngest, and he's 7 to be, you know, and if I get through to get him to 18, I'll be happy. And Lila's 15, so I know that the time I have with them is limited. Yeah. So all the memories I want them to have of me are happy memories of someone who still climbs trees, still told terrible jokes, effed and blinded, and things like that when he was cross.
What I like about you, Alex, is politically you can be quite pessimistic. You know, you go sometimes, Alex. You know, who was the famous journalist? Somebody said he was the type of man who put the light out at the end of the tunnel. Who was the light out?
That was Mr. White.
Mr. White. But politically, on Twitter and I'm talking about you're a big softie. You're a big sentimentalist.
I'm not. How outrageous.
Your stuff about Indy and Lila Liberty and stuff like that on Twitter. I mean, it's lovely, but it's quite sentimental. You are a big softie.
Do you know something? I got to the age.
Your partner Kerry, she must go. Oh, shut up! Stop telling me. No. Does she not mind you?
No, actually, it's funny when Kerry and I first became an item. And she told her father, who oddly enough I knew in another life, and he said, "Who is it? And he said, "Alex Kane." He said, "Oh my God, he's an utter nutter." 25 years later, you know, I don't think he's revised his opinion, but he's got used to me. But no, I got to 45. I was content because, as I said, I'm not a sociable person. I don't really go to parties and dinners and things. I have a very small, tight circle of friends, maybe 5 or 6. And if I need to go to work, I work. I hate going to the pre if you're a guest speaker. You know, this thing, you know, and so many people say to me, "Oh God, I thought you were going to be so boring because, you know, because you said nothing at the dinner table, you just sat there, and then you just, you know, push the button and it starts." But I'd got to that stage. I was happy. I had my circle. I wasn't looking for anybody in particular, and I wasn't lonely, but I was alone. And then I met Kerry, and again, it's a terrible old cliche, but it was almost love at first sight. And it's the first time in my life, at the age of, it had been maybe September, October, 25 years ago. And I remember thinking, I'm lonely. really, really lonely. And here's someone who seems to think, and she's younger than me, here's someone who seems to think that we can build a relationship.
Right.
Within about 6 months, maybe we were living together. It's been a very happy 25 years, but again, I never expected it. I actually just thought I'd be wallowing around the house, quoting Sherlock Holmes to myself and tripping over bottles of Pimm's and things like that. I thought that was going to be, about 6 months after I died. Somebody go, "Where's Alex?" I haven't seen him for a while. And then suddenly you find everything. It is sentimental, but everything changes. You suddenly find this moment, you want to live, you want to keep going, and you want to keep going. And people say, "Why do you still climb trees? Why do you still go up there?" And you do it for the kid, but you do it for yourself as well, because I missed so much of my life. I may have siblings somewhere. I missed that. I grew up as an only child. I grew up as a congenitally shy, and still a very. I know you think probably I am still a very, very shy person. And so on. So and Kerry doesn't mind that, because she knows it's who I am, and people do like talking about it. And it's the one thing away from politics. You'll know, for any of you follow the Twitter thing, I mean, 80% of it's nothing to do with politics.
No, it's all about
terrible
going
jokes.
to school and
it's black and white
terrible
films.
jokes. Whoa! You do have one brilliant gag that you had about when Game of Thrones was going on here, and there was lots of nonsense.
I was very proud of that one. Yes,
it's like said Northern Ireland politics is basically Game of Thrones. Which I thought was very good.
You sent me a little message saying.
Yeah, no, I like that one.
Somebody else said.
You're a man of terrible puns, though, aren't you?
Yeah, somebody else said, "Stop writing now, Alex, because you'll never write a better line than that." But yeah, no, I just love puns. But that was the reading, because while other people were out kicking football and playing and so on, I was at home, and I just love playing with words.
And you have a minor obsession. Well, it's not fairly minor. It's major obsession with Sherlock Holmes.
I love Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, it's just, and again, it's because. Kerry always says, well, she hates him. She says,
does she not?
"Oh, he's just cold, the fishes, clicks his heels and walks off in this snooty manner." And I said, and you wonder why you don't love him. And this is me you're talking about.
I'm a big fan. Jeremy Brett's obviously the best ever, I would say.
The ideal Holmes, yes.
Yeah? You agree?
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. I've always thought Brett was. He was the one that brought me back to him.
He was ITV, wasn't he?
He was ITV, that's right.
ITV, yes, December 1984. I think was the
Better
first.
Dominic Cumberbatch,
Yeah. I'm saying no. I look, Brett. Everyone's got their homes. It's like everyone's got their Doctor Who.
Basil Rathbone, surely.
Don't call him Shirley. Sorry. No, Basil Rathbone was good for his generation, and that was the Wars generation. He was good for another generation was Peter Cushing, and then Brett, and then for this present one it's Benedict Cumberbatch, and then you've Robert Downey Jr., you've Johnny Lee Miller. There's always someone who will always say that is my Sherlock Holmes. And for me, oddly enough, I used to be Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee until I saw Matt Smith, and I suddenly said, "Okay, that is now it will always be my Doctor Who." So, and it's good. You should have those things in your life. How do we get onto this?
Let's get back to politics.
Yeah.
Where did unionism go wrong?
whoa!
Was that a serious question? I was like, yeah.
Where has it gone wrong?
Do you know something? On a really serious answer to unionism, and I think it explains where it is now. It's assumed right from the beginning that no one is interested in it. You go back to the Home Rule crisis. These are people, unionists, there would have been conservative unionists living in across Ireland, not just in the northern part, but who believed they were British, who never thought that their identity and their constitutional status would be altered. And in 1886, the government goes, well, actually, to keep in power with the Irish Parliamentary Party, what about United Ireland? Would that be okay? And suddenly these people realised we have been betrayed. And even if you go all the way through that from, when they thought they weren't being betrayed, and the 1912, 1914, they thought it's okay, and then they end up with a parliament they don't want, a state they don't want, a Northern Ireland they don't want, and they never ever wanted the other thing. They never really ever wanted to be Ulster Unionists, because the minute you become Ulster Unionists, when the rest of the country is some other type of unionist, conservative unionist, it's like Patricia Devlin was a Dervla, I can't remember who it was, who talked about Northern Ireland first being a place apart. Northern Ireland, it was that sense of being a place apart which began in the first Home Rule crisis and has continued ever since. And unionists are in this terrible dilemma. In my generation, if you go back, they will say the Parliament was brought down. Their Parliament was brought down. Their constitutional guarantee, which you're unionist or you're British until your Parliament decides otherwise. Oh, by the way, we've taken away your Parliament now. And then there was to be an Irish dimension. The Irish dimension was, what does that mean? Well, it means that the Irish government, who at that time have a claim on Northern Ireland, will now have an automatic right of input and influence over your future because the sovereign Parliament of the United Kingdom has decided that that's okay. Then the Anglo-Irish Agreement, then the frameworks document, then the Downing Street Declaration with the we have no selfish strategic interest in you. And then you have a series of high courts over Brexit which say no, the sovereign Parliament can do what it likes. And then what Jim talking about colonialism, Jim Alistair, talking about, and if you look back to Carson's famous, we were just puppets. That was 1921. It was
just after the treaty.
December 1921. Move forward to December 2024, and you have Jim Alistair in the House of Commons talking about that Northern Ireland has just become a colony. And this is this journey for unionism in their whole history. It's a long line of betrayal. And it's a long line of them having to do U-turns. And it's deeply ingrained in their psyche that somehow they're going to be betrayed. But the problem is, if the betrayal has been done by the very sovereign Parliament on whom you rely for your existence, who do you rebel against? So unionists turn their anger on anybody else. They turn it on Alliance, they turn it on Sinn Féin, on the SDLP, on each other, on latte drinking unions. They turn it on everybody, but refuse to face the one horrible, glaring, thumping reality is their problem is the sovereign Parliament. That's what they have to deal with. And if unionism is to survive and the union is to survive, they have to face that reality and see how they can work around it. But they may just have left it far too long.
They were pretty bad to vote for Brexit, though, weren't they?
Well, I have to say, I voted for Brexit.
I know, I was very disappointed you voted for Brexit. I thought you'd be a sensible person.
Well, it's actually funny. We were doing something in the City Hall with NI for Kids award thing.
Upset.
Yes, it came over. No, well, I won't use the exact word you used. We said, I still like your jokes, which is fine. But no, I don't resile from that vote. What I didn't foresee, and also I said it, and I wrote at the time. I said even if Brexit is voted for, one thing we know in Northern Ireland, and we've known it since 1921, there will always be a bespoke arrangement made. In exactly the same way the Good Friday Agreement was bespoke. We allow each other to accept certain things without fighting over it too much, and that was the deal. What I didn't factor into my thinking, and maybe I'm stupid, but maybe what I didn't factor in was that the implosion of the Conservative Party in a civil war, which you go back to Borgia territory, and also I didn't fully understand that the sovereign Parliament of the United Kingdom would find itself unable to make decisions. And the problem with that is that with implosion on one side and inability to make decisions on the other, it opened up this new space for an absolutely horrible new populism, which had nothing to do with the sovereignty or of the United Kingdom, nothing to do with the history or culture of the United Kingdom. It was just a new blame. Everybody blamed the establishment. It's what we'd seen sweeping across from America at much the same time. I don't resile from the vote.
But was it not obvious that the border was going along the Irish Sea?
No, we didn't need it. Something, I said, a bespoke arrangement would have been done where we wouldn't have talked about a border in the Irish Sea. It would have been there, it would have existed, but nobody would have talked about it. It's a bit like the border poll in one sense. It's about like all the things that happened when from 1972 onwards here. Things happened without anybody ever talking about it. One side didn't like something, let's not make too much of a fuss. Let's not make too much of a fuss. We all got on with it. And so it's like the DUP and Sinn Féin yesterday talking about the programme for government. Yeah. And then you wake up this morning to hear Mike Nesbitt saying, well, I am now, thank you, I've voted for this, my party's voted for this, I'm now writing to the First and Deputy First Minister to see if there's actually any money to be done. And then you'd Andrew Muir go, yes, my party voted for as well, but we will also be writing. And you think, so we'll all pretend that there's a programme for government. We'll all pretend that everybody's doing their best. We'll all pretend that the executive is working together. We'll all pretend that the SDLP is pretending to be the opposition. But nobody's going to come out and say, bring the whole thing down because it's a whole bloody farce because nobody wants to deal with the reality. If you say that, then where are we? Where do we? So
See, I voted for Brexit as well, but for entirely different
two of
reasons.
us in the one hemisphere.
But for totally different reasons.
Remainer.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
are.
Oh, it's not often I find myself in the majority, Tim. So
But the reason I voted for it was, and I wish I'd put it in an envelope and could open it here and say what was going to happen. But there was three main reasons. One, it would weaken the union here, because I'm not a unionist, right? Secondly, it would wreck the Tory party, which would be a good thing. And thirdly, that the Scots would get another go at independence. Now, that doesn't happen, but...
2 out of 3 in bad in terms of
yeah.
Well, it was also for me. It was a democratic. I personally, my vote was about the treatment of Greece. The
Oh, yes.
way Greece was treated.
Yes,
That was
absolutely.
appalling.
Oh, absolutely. That was the end of it.
Completely colonial treatment of Greece.
Yeah.
And still is.
Yeah.
Still is to this day. So I have a very
I
nuanced
think
view
it
about
was
the EU.
described as John Stewart said that treatment of
Nuanced?
Greece.
Yeah, nuanced. It's not a
Same side as Farage, you're wrong.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
no,
that's
no,
it.
no,
Yeah,
no,
this
no,
is
no.
fascinating, I'm sure, for our
Anyway,
listeners
yes,
about
absolutely.
the rerun of the 2016 referendum. Thanks, lads.
that's your audience is slashed when you do your next. They're Brexit supporters.
But on the treatment of Greece, I think John Stewart summed it up when he said it was like, sitting on somebody's chest and gobbing into their mouth. That's how he explained how they treated Greece.
I think you can find that online somewhere, actually, if you're so inclined.
It's a website for everyone.
That's
yes.
So you are currently writing a book, are you?
It's a reflection on my time in unionism,
Right.
and I've been involved in unionism at all sorts of levels, and to try and explain where we are, how we got here, and whether there is a way out. And basically, anyone who's ever read a column, and I've been writing columns for 40 years, will know what to expect. It's for
Oh, no surprises.
no surprise, and terrible jokes. But it's just because I spend so much time, with people saying to me, even people who follow politics closely, but from all political parties, well, they over and over again they talk about unionism. Tell me this about union. Almost every panel I do, which even the ones I've done nothing to do, I've been invited on totally other reasons. There'll always be some say, while you're here, just when we've got you, Alex can ask you this, and it's always usually start with people. I'd be unionist, but I don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand why we're doing. Or I would like to stay in the United Kingdom, but unionism is making it difficult. Or people say I'm pro-union, but I've never voted for a unionist party. I never could vote for a unionist party. And I began just write about a year ago. I began writing down all these questions people asked me. I thought there's a book in there, and I took it to a publisher. And I sent them the pitch on a Thursday afternoon or Friday morning. He sent me thinking, yeah, let's talk.
Wow.
Okay. And he seems to think there is. Partly he says it's because for a lot of people who follow politics on both sides, you are a known quantity. And also, it's not a defense of unionism in any sense. It's not taking them apart. It's simply trying to explain what unionism is. And indeed, when I tweeted about it, is it tweet, but X, whatever it is, I did about it. I was surprised because there were a number of people from both the British and Irish side of this equation, who they said, I look forward to reading that, Alex, because I had to deal with them for years in negotiations, and I still don't know what they believe in.
From the other side, though, Shinners clearly don't understand unionism in any shape or form. We just think, United Ireland's inevitable, and we'll make it economically viable, but it's not about economics or anything like that. You're never going to vote for United Ireland, ever, even if you lived to 100, are you?
No, I wouldn't. Maybe in one sense it's too
Even
late.
if we offered you £1 million and
up it a bit. No, no. It's one of those things, Tim. It's to do. I'm biddable on a lot of things, but I think for most people, the most important thing when it comes to voting, when you take your ballot paper in, no matter which party you vote on, I'm not just talking about Northern Ireland, anywhere, when you put that ballot paper in the box, you, in most cases, are voting for a party which you think is closest to your worldview, but more importantly, is closest to how you view yourself, to your citizenship, to where your allegiance lies constitutionally and politically. And if there was ever a war or something like that, is this something you would fight for? Is this someone you would sacrifice yourself for? So for me, it's too late. My age now, it's too much. I've lost. I don't get sentimental about it because there's no point. Everyone goes. Who've begotten, whether it was the IRA or loyalist paramilitarism, we all take steps along our life. I was lucky I could write. I was lucky I could find a role for myself where I could talk about my unionism, what matters to me, and so on. Other people couldn't do that. Other people were suckered in on both sides. People said, "Oh, you must," and then just left. And a lot of those people in paramilitarism, even in the IRA, who would pretend it doesn't, but a lot of them for the rest of their lives. they're struggling with demons.
Yeah.
So for me, I couldn't make that leap. But I've said to my children that like going back to what my dad said to me, if there's going to be United Ireland, if the border poll comes in my lifetime, it may depend on how much longer I've got. My advice to them, I would say, look, I would make it clear if I was still writing, I will not be voting for United Ireland. But I would say to them, you won't upset me if you choose to, because you will have to live.
Yeah.
You'll have to live with all of this. But I think in terms of people, I've seen, I get stuff, piles, enormous piles of crap from, academics and so on, saying, here's the economic argument for United Ireland. Here's the economic argument for United Kingdom. Here's the economic argument for the European Union. None of them ever seem to touch on what matters to people in the heart and their head. And you can rubbish that, and people say, oh, the people, you can lead them where you want. That's what people are. So where there are people who will decide when they walk into that polling station, it won't matter. It will not matter a damn if all the economic argument is in favour of a United Ireland. They will not vote for United Ireland. It won't matter if it's in favour of the United Kingdom. They won't. Because it's not that.
Well, why did unionists not just chill and go, we're all right, don't worry about it?
But you know what?
Don't chill.
That would
right.
that would be my
Catholics going. Yeah.
That would be my view. I mean, don't
take it easy.
Yeah, don't make a big issue. Just be. Well, my advice to unionism is, fine. Don't wear your heart in your sleeve in the sense of, the town crier of Pompeii thing. Yeah. Whoa, we're doomed, everyone. And see this thing, which really pisses me off enormously. It's that wing of unionism said, how come we were supposed to get this? How come they've got everything? How come? And you should go, maybe they're better organised. Maybe they're making a better case. Maybe they're going to the right places. But I never thought we'd get to the stage within unionism where, it's two-tier policing, it's two-tier judiciary, it's two-tier media.
Yeah.
If it is two-tier, it's because A, they're better, or B, you're making your case. Unionism divides itself. You have... I've been called a traitor by unionists simply because I've said we need to discuss the following things. And they go, oh, well, no, we don't. We need to stand firm. I said, like we did in 72, like we did in 74, like we did... all these things we were told were never going to happen. I also have this thing, which I said earlier in this. There's certain things you can't say with certainty they will happen, but there's a fair likelihood. And my view has always been, in life generally, but in politics in particular, and there's a Holmes things as well, be prepared for every eventuality. So even if you think a border poll isn't going to come for 20 years, do the paperwork. If you're a unionist and you want to defend it, because you do not want to get to a situation in unionism where somebody said, because they hang on to the view in paragraph 35 of the Good Friday Agreement, which says there will not be a border poll until a Secretary of State decides it's likely. And they say, well, the conditions, and I hear this all the time meeting people say, well, Alex, the conditions are, they haven't been met. And I would go, well, tell me the conditions then. And they go, well, likely, define likely. Does it mean probable? Is it possible? I go, well, and I said, and who's going to make this decision? Yeah, Labour Secretary of State or Conservative. They have a long history of doing what unionism wants them to do. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for this. And the same with Paisley. You can go from the collapse of Parliament right there. I mean, Faulkner collapsed it because he thought it would force the British government. And I have a great time for Faulkner. Huge admiration for him. But... and one of the last chances I got to talk to him was about a year before he died. Right. And I was still at Queen's, and I said to him, Brian, do you ever regret, because he was a friend of my dad's, do you regret? And he said, yes, I thought the government would buckle. And then I realised that they weren't going to buckle, and we had no plan made. But he followed that through with, but then, when they brought down the assembly,
in 74?
They had no plan made either. Mm. And this is the thing, unionism has to start learning to make plans, and we don't do that. So I just think, it's going to be a difficult thing. It's not an existential question in one sense, but a border poll is coming, and my advice to all sides, don't blind each other with science. Don't say on one side, it's inevitable we will win, and don't say on the other side, oh, well, we're not even going to bother about it. Be prepared and keep it civil.
The Scouts motto, be prepared.
Be prepared, yes, that's right. Be prepared.
Alex, we're running out of time here. One last question. We've Gavin Robinson coming on very soon. What would you ask Gavin Robinson? What should we ask Gavin Robinson?
Actually, what you should ask Gavin is, how difficult is it? And I don't mean just him and his business, but how difficult is it to lead a unionist party? Because every person I've ever talked to who has led a unionist party or been a senior figure in a unionist party has always said the same thing. It's very difficult to keep them all on the same. There's a great story, David McNary. I have a very quick time. Let's go back to 1977. David McNary was David.
Yeah, I remember
David Trimmel's gatekeeper for a while up in the assembly. About 1977, it was just after the UUC had been sort of falling apart. And somebody had said to Jim Molyneux, Jim, what we need to do is get all the unions part, the DUP Vanguard, the United Ulster Unionist Movement, the West Belfast Coalition, also get these the Orange and the Loyalist paramilitary connections and things like that. Go down the bus. There's a hotel in Portrush and get them all together. We'll leave them off there on the Thursday and we'll pick them up on the Monday and we'll have sorted something out. And David just went, oh my God. You will go down with 8 parties, 2 Mavericks, 3 offshoots. You'll come back on Monday morning. There'll be 11 parties. There'll be 7 offshoots. Jim, do not do this. Do not go down that path. We need to talk to each other, but don't set it up as some great big, this is a coming together of unionism, because it never ever. And oddly enough, the last coming together was Peter Robinson and Mike Nesbitt. Do you remember they called the Unionist Forum? Yes. Within 4 months, it had collapsed because they'd all fallen out. Not with outsiders, they'd all fallen out with each other. And maybe that's the lesson of unionism. Yeah, ask Gavin about that. How does unionism ever sit there? Because he's had talks, private talks with some of these people. How do we ever? And I said, I'm an unashamed unionist. I'm embarrassed by them sometimes, but I'm an unashamed unionist. How do we get our act together? What's the best thing?
Alex, thank you very much for your time. You're an absolute gentleman.
The
best of luck to you and Indy and Layla and climbing trees.
I'll be branching out into whole forest.
And if we'd like a free copy of your book, who knows, you might even read it. Alex Kane.
I wouldn't insist on that, to be honest.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this episode of the Give My Head podcast. Lots of politics and history in this one. That's okay. That's good. We like a bit of variety in this podcast. Thank you very much to Alex Kane. If you like, subscribe and send us an email if you want. We're possibly going to do a live show in the next few months. Are we getting that right, Dan? Yeah, we're possibly going to do a live show. We'll speak to you about that very soon. Thank you very much for listening. Tell your friends. In the meantime, thank you very much. Alex Kane, thank you.
Thank you.